Welcome to Literacy Matters, Empowered Conversations. I'm your host, Dr. Cheryl Swift. In our previous episodes, Katrina Erickson helped us build a clear understanding of dysgraphia. She told us what it is, what it isn't, and how we can appropriately identify it. Today, we're continuing that conversation by grounding it in real school practice. I am excited to talk with Jaime Drew. Jaime Drew is a district reading specialist from Magnolia ISD. Welcome to the show, Jaime.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited that everyone gets to hear your wonderful wisdom. So, we're going to mix things up a little bit for our season 5. And we'd love for you to tell us 3 things that we should know about you and your work.
Okay, well, I've been in education for 25 years. I think something that's unique is I've held a lot of different roles. I've taught everything first through 6th grade. I've been an instructional coach on a campus, and now I'm at the district level. And I've also been an interventionist that has worked with students with dysgraphia and dyslexia. And last, I am a mom of a 12-year-old.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to get into this conversation. So when you think about like your experience, again, you've held many, many roles and you're still practicing. So as a practicing educator, how does dysgraphia actually show up in the classroom and what are some early signs that we can look out for?
I think we typically think of dysgraphia as just seeing those students who only struggle with letter formation or spacing and like letter size, like that visual spatial, being able to where to put letters on a page. But there's also other signs that we can see within dysgraphia. We see kids who struggle with writing composition, getting all of their thoughts down on paper. We see kiddos that have difficulty with spelling, and a lot of writing fatigue falls into that. Skipping words when they write. Their brain is often moving a lot faster than they can write. So these things, if they're consistently occurring, are signs. Um, I think we see a few other little things like kids, we can kind of see things at a little bit earlier age, kids who can't cross their midline. That might be something that could be affecting how they learn to write.
Can you say more like what exactly is the midline for those who are like wondering? I know my occupational therapists out there are like cheering that you're even using this term.
Yeah, crossing your midline is your line of symmetry down the middle of your body. So we can see when kids are very young, my child, for example, didn't crawl. He did not cross his midline. He went straight into walking. He couldn't do jumping jacks when he first started martial arts. They were really awkward and he couldn't get his arms and legs moving together. So that's something that we can kind of see in writing as well, because we'll see kids who don't have hand dominance. They might write with their right and their left, which sometimes that kind of falls off, but you might still see kids as they get a little older struggle with that. Um, we might see kiddos who struggle with how to orientate paper. Like they don't know which way to turn it on their desk. They'll move their body at funny angles to try to get their hand in the right spot. So that all connects to their midline.
It's so funny that you would mention that. Like all the things that you just mentioned, it almost could be a commercial for Learning Without Tears. When I first learned all of the other kinds of things that they do besides just make sure that children are writing efficiently in terms of learning how to form their letters, all of those important things, trying to make sure that you have a good grip, that you are using your preferred hand to write and so forth, are all important. Knowing paper placement and what to do with your other hand that you're not writing with, or we call your helper hand, all of those things are important. And I'm glad that you mentioned it and brought it up because we don't actually think about dysgraphia as even connecting to some of those things. So, I know I've heard a lot of teachers. I know when I taught, I did not actually hear the term dysgraphia. I didn't know what it was. We're seeing more and more students being classified as students with disabilities because they might have dysgraphia. And so when I think about that, there are more and more teachers who also may not have heard about dysgraphia. And so when I think about how they might be supporting students, how exactly can a teacher who has an effective tier 1 like instructional plan, right, support students who are struggling with handwriting but actually don't have dysgraphia?
Absolutely. Like that tier 1 instruction is so critical. And what that looks like, but then also how we support within tier 1 is really important. So when we are teaching and when we're modeling with students But then we have to go in and we have to make sure that we're monitoring student work and we're giving them feedback. So, if we have talking about kinder or first grade students, like we need to be looking at how they're gripping their pencil, looking at, okay, so if they're not doing it right, what do I do? And I think that's where sometimes teachers get hung up, is not always knowing the next steps, because our gen ed teachers have so much on their plate. So how do we make sure that we've got kids using the correct pencil grip, that they're starting in the right place when they're making their letters? So that's kind of the first step, is really monitoring and making sure we know what kids are doing. But then we can scaffold for kids, right? We can give them some supports as they need to. So that's where we look at, what are we having kids write with? The actual writing utensil can make a difference.
Yeah.
So, we see kids in classrooms a lot, kids writing on whiteboards with markers. Well, that's not the same as a pencil, right? So what are we using for our handwriting instruction is important too.
I that's that is so important. You're right that whiteboards are not the same. They don't give the same feedback. They're bigger, right? We believe that, small tools for small hands. That's our little slogan. So we are always using those golf-sized pencils for little hands. I remember when I was in kindergarten, just a few years ago, of course. I wrote with that big old fat pencil, which wasn't the best for my little weak hands, where I needed an occupational therapist myself.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
another thing teachers can do when we think about other supports kids need, like, where do we start on our paper? That can be something our dysgraphic students struggle with because they
Mhm.
don't know where to actually even begin. So thinking about our paper choice is important. Does it mirror what we're using for instruction?
Mm.
If we've been having kids work in their books and they always start in the same spot, but when I transfer to a different kind of paper with a different kind of line, do they know where to start? Some kids just kind of get it, and other kids will struggle with, where do I even start the letter? If it doesn't have the three lines, where do I even start, you know, a
Yeah.
lowercase letter, a capital letter?
So
So
Jamie,
those are,
how might a teacher actually, what would they do? So let's say that you do have a child who, again, you've been working in your, let's say, Handwriting Without Tears workbook, and like you said, we do help children, as we scaffold. We help them at the beginning by giving them a little dot to show exactly
mhm.
where to start. But what happens when they move over to like three lined paper, or even our double lined paper? What should a teacher do?
Well, the first step is not moving to that too quickly. If we've been using something in handwriting, we need to continue that same kind of setup in writing composition so the transfer is easier for our children who struggle. But I do think there are some kids you need to give them that little starting dot. You need to have the conversation and you need to model for them, where do I even start? They aren't just going to know intuitively.
Absolutely. We cannot assume that they get it,
Yeah,
right? Again, they
correct.
might not, again, taught versus caught, right? And I think I love being able to put up what the paper actually looks like, or somehow display the pages. Even we have our interactive teaching tool that's really great, that you can actually display on your smartboard, and you can easily have kids come up and write on those double lines. And of course, we have more than double lines. We have triple lines in there as well, and we have single lines. So I think that's always important, to be able to model. I think that's really great advice. When we think about what teachers are already doing, I know a lot of my educator friends are like, I can't take one more thing on. I can't take one more change. They're just overwhelmed, as you mentioned, right? So what are some small instructional shifts that can really make a big difference for students who are struggling with handwriting?
I think we need to make use of the time we have. So if you're already doing small group instruction for phonics or for reading or for writing, you add in a little dictation piece to the end of your phonics lesson where you're actually seeing kids write in front of you so you can give that feedback in real time. That's an easy way just to kind of slide something else in there for kids.
Hmm.
So doing that explicit dictation, giving this feedback and the support that kids need. Um, I think also giving them feedback when they're spelling, that can be really tricky. So that kind of moves from the handwriting into, how we're processing and putting letters on the page. So making sure that they're continuing to do that good work when they're in their small groups with the teacher.
Wow, I love that. You know, when you think about a child that has with dysgraphia, oftentimes they're trying to avoid writing altogether, whether they're acting out or they're just not doing the assignment. What can teachers do, like in those kind of small moments, to like encourage them to write and to not be fearful?
I think the first step is chunking the work for kids. It can be very overwhelming, and we have a lot of students who don't even want to get started because it's so much. So
Mhm.
asking them just to do part of the writing to begin with, if I'm working on composition with, a kiddo sitting in third grade, I might say, okay, I want you to do the introduction.
Sure.
Walk them through a little bit. Maybe we talk it out a little bit. Okay, I want you to do that, and then I'm going to come back and check on you. And then you do the next step. So you break it up so it's a little easier for them. Um, Other things are we need to get kids' brains ready to learn. So that goes back to that crossing the midline, where can we get their brains ready to go before they even get started? Can I give them some quick little activity where we're going to kind of prime their brain ready for learning?
What's a practical thing that they might do to get their brain moving
Um,
already?
there's a lot of really little easy things that teachers can do. You can do this before the start of whole group instruction or small group instruction, or even you've got that kiddo who's just not ready to write. Can I have him do a couple little things with me real quick? Little things like doing figure eights in front of you with your finger. So take your pointer finger, do a figure eight, and then switch to the other side. There's a simple crossing the midline. There's a lot of other things you can do where you can get kids up and touching opposite elbows to opposite knees. That's a crossing the midline. Jumping jacks are crossing midline. That might be a little too much for a small group. But anything that kind of gets them moving from one side of their body to the other, and that helps make connections across their brain.
I love that. And so, we've been talking about handwriting, but when we think about children who are, who really have dysgraphia or who are really just having trouble, what do you think about typing?
Typing is absolutely a skill that they need. It can be something that helps make it a little bit easier, but typing also requires kids to cross their midline. So it does need some explicit instruction. You need to give kids a way to practice that. They're not going to just pick it up automatically. So using some kind of typing program is good. That can be something that can be written into accommodations for
Sure.
kids. But that's something we're moving into this very digital age. We're there. Kids need this skill. So it's something that can kind of take that mental load off a little bit more for kids as they get a little bit older. I'm in the state of Texas in third grade. We start on our state tests where kids have to type out an essay,
Yeah.
an extended constructed response. If we put typing in place, we're giving kids those supports before they get to the actual test.
I think that's
Okay.
that's critical. Like at the end of the day, it's so funny that when we discover that a child might be having difficulty handwriting, and then we go, we're going to give them typing. Typing is not the magic bullet, right? It is also something that must be explicitly taught, and it really needs to be developmentally appropriate. So that's why we developed Keyboarding Without Tears as well. It is developmentally appropriate for students. It's grade level specific. So kindergartner is not going to get the same typing program, for example, that a fifth grader is going to get. So I think all of those things are key, but the point is that I think you're making is critical. That's a great tool, but we still have to show kids how to use it, which is important. And I love the connection to the midline that you made at the very beginning, which I think is something super important.
But it does not replace that handwriting instruction. That is
Huh.
still very crucial. It's not just, oh, we're putting in a typing accommodation. They don't need to learn the handwriting. Handwriting is a skill that kids need throughout their whole life. That's how we communicate. It's something they're always going to need. So when we provide interventions for kids, typing should be a part of it, but we also can't let go of the handwriting piece.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah, it doesn't replace it, right? It is,
No.
it's another option, but it doesn't replace it. I like that. So we've been talking a lot about teachers and what they can be doing. You mentioned tier one support being important, using small group to support students who might be struggling, and leveraging the time that they have, like with phonics, for example, and giving dictation. What can school leaders do? Like what do they need to do to understand, how to really better support teachers and students when it comes to dysgraphia?
We need to have more conversations. We need to have more conversations around this. We get very focused on some of the other content, and handwriting is a piece that can become a wall for some kids. For a lot of kids, writing is not something that is enjoyable. So we need to have conversations. School leaders need to make sure that we have some vertical alignment discussions across grade levels and even across districts, across within a district, that we have consistent instruction. That's really important. If when it comes to consistent instruction, we're talking about what does that look like from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to third grade? So kids are moving across this continuum and not getting one kind of letter formation in one grade level, and then it's changing when they go to first grade, or using different kinds of paper across grade levels. What should that look like as kids grow throughout a school or a district? Um,
I love that. So you're saying really you're not even you're talking a district level system wide kind of support is what you're mentioning here, right?
yeah, and if you don't have the power to do that, you have the power to have conversations within your school. So best if it's a district-wide thing, because we have kids that move within district and we want to be consistent, but also within your campus. If you don't have the power to control what happens at the district level, you can have those conversations on your campus, whether you're a school leader or you're a teacher.
Yeah.
So you can always be fostering those conversations. I
Yeah.
think another thing that teachers could do to help with these conversations is to invite other school staff in to help them. So, for example, I was in a PLC earlier this week with a first grade teacher that said, "Hey, my OT brought me some pencil grips. I need some help with this kid, and I don't know what else to do." So, that can be conversations that we have, or, invite, instructional specialists in, invite special ed personnel that might be on your campus or at the district level, or your occupational therapist to come in and be a part of those conversations.
Yeah, I think those partnerships are critical. And I love that you mentioned them all, right? We want all the related services to come to the table. We want all of the grade levels to come to the table to have the conversation because, I believe again, there's power in conversations. Change happens, right? When there's conversation. And growth happens for sure when there's conversation. I know for me, being able to observe other teachers and talk to other teachers have just helped me become a better educator in general, right? It makes me aware of things that I didn't even know I needed to be aware of, for example. So you mentioned PLCs. How important is professional learning and PLCs and all of that when it comes to changing outcomes for students with and without dysgraphia?
Well, that's where the conversations have to happen. Whether it's professional learning on a campus or at a district level, that's where we learn from each other and we have the conversations within our PLC of our own campus or our own grade level. That's where we can make specific change for specific kids. But having that professional learning, like you said at the beginning, I didn't learn about dysgraphia. When I went through college, it was not something that was talked about. I didn't learn about it in any of my classes. So we need to be talking about that. What does it look like? What are we going to do for kids? What are supports we can give? And that's just all a part of what do we do when kids are struggling?
Sure, sure. When it comes to like teachers and families, right? Um, most I had a young man once whose handwriting was really really not great, and his mom was just beside herself and like was like didn't really know what to do, and there was a lot of angry homework sessions.
Can
From
completely relate.
from both ends, right? You've been there, and I've been there for sure too. So tell me, like, what do you advise families to do or caregivers to do with those students who they're struggling, who are struggling?
I think the first step is having conversations with the teachers,
Yep.
so that parents can be aware of what they're learning in class so that they can help with, continuing the same kind of instruction. So I know that Learning Without Tears has some parent resources on their website, and that's incredibly helpful. But conversations are first, but there are lots of little easy things that parents can do to get that practice in and sneak it in where it's not a struggle and a fight. So, have your kid help you write the grocery list. That's authentic writing experience where you can see what they're doing and you can be like, oh, well, I can't read that word that you wrote. What was that? And making them aware. That also works on spelling. Um, if you're on vacation, writing postcards to family, like put a lot of times those don't have lines on them, but you can draw the lines so the kids have something to ground themselves on when they're writing. But any kind of authentic writing that you can do at home. Um, my own kid, when we were getting ready for the state test in third grade, we had a little notebook where we did some writing composition back and forth with each other. So might be as simply as explain what your favorite movie is and why. So they're having to give the evidence. But we all did that as a part of our family. So we would each write a response. Like that was easy. It didn't take a lot of time, and he didn't fight us on that.
Yeah.
Um, Another really easy thing, like to work on something like spelling, which was a struggle for my own kid, we did texting. So in the car when I'm driving, instead of me just voice texting, I would hand the phone to my kid and say, hey, I need you to text so and say this. So they would practice. You're not allowed to use the voice texting, but he would have to practice that spelling piece.
These are some really practical tools that like parents can do on even on the go. So when we think about handwriting, most people think about like pre-K and kindergarten children who are just learning to like form their letters. But I know that handwriting is something that can be worked on and should be worked on all the way up, even I believe through middle school. But if you have children with dysgraphia, we know that it can impact them emotionally and academically. How can we support those older learners, right, in like, say, fourth and fifth grade who are struggling?
Yeah, absolutely. Not being able to write effectively is only going to become a bigger struggle as kids get older and the learning gaps continue to increase because they get more and more frustrated. So I think early identification is always key, but not always something within our control, especially if we teach those upper grades and kids get to us. I think attitudes and understanding is really important on the teacher's end. That's the first step is instead of getting frustrated with kids when they're not writing fast enough, or the kids have trouble getting started, which is something we can see in the upper grades, is taking a moment to understand where the kid is coming from. Why is there a struggle here? It's not just because they're working slow. So I think first we have to kind of start there and we have to realize what is impeding the student from doing the work. Is it because they don't understand the task? Is it because they don't know how to get started? If they're really struggling with all of the things, putting pencil to paper, getting the thoughts out, we have to start there. And you start with that oral conversation and breaking it down. So if we're answering a question or we're writing an essay, what's the first step? What's just the first step you need to do? So we kind of have to simplify it for some kids. But I think
Yeah.
understanding on the teacher's end is most important.
Hmm. And and that can be hard when we have all these pressures, right? So thank you
Yeah,
for
if
that.
you're teaching fifth or sixth grade and you have 150 kids, that's hard to have the time
Right.
to know every kid inside and out, like you do if you're a self-contained second grade teacher, right? It's a
Right.
very different experience. So I think the first spot is be encouraging and not get frustrated.
Yeah, I love that because it is a difference, and I think it's important to always try and also see where what the teacher is experiencing so they can know, right? So as we finish our conversation, what advice would you give to school leaders, teachers, and families to really empower them to better support students with dysgraphia?
I think we always need to look for those opportunities to help students grow. We have to meet kids where they're at and think about what do I need to do? What's one thing I can do with this kid to help them grow today? So start small, and then you will see the gains over time.
Yeah. I think that's great. A great advice to start small, right? Uh, I also think give kids grace, give yourself a little grace. Isn't that nice?
Absolutely.
Like, what do you mean? I cannot tell you enough. Like, I can't wait for our listening audience to really, and even our audience who watches us, to see and hear all the wonderful things that you said. I really, I'm taking away the midline, the importance of really crossing that midline, because I do know how important that is. So thank you for sharing your wisdom of practice, and I wish you a great, great, great rest of the school year.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course.